Hey everyone, I wanted to make a quick video on how to sell covered calls using the IA suite. This video is going to be mostly on how to sell covered calls using the suite in particular. I'll make a separate video on the actual option strategy, but this video will be targeted more towards people who already are familiar with what selling covered calls is and know how powerful they are. James talks about selling covered calls like it's stealing candy from a baby, and that's because it is pretty straightforward, it is pretty easy, and you get to define a lot of your own terms. That's why a lot of people trade covered calls, because you can take the premium, put it aside, and then you can go and enjoy the rest of your week. So what I wanted to do in this video is just show how I use the suite to sell covered calls. Again, this is what's worked well for me, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work well for everybody, but I sell covered calls all the time, and I use all of the premium to reinvest it into assets that are undervalued. Or one of the favorite things that I like to do is you hedge Tesla here on the sell signal, and you actually keep the premium and you redeploy it on buy signals. So how do I use the suite to sell covered calls? I primarily use the ATR model. I think sometimes there is indicator overload where you're trying to use ATR, IDSS, mean reversion, LILO, optimized trend, and sometimes it's information overload. And sometimes it's better to become a master at one tool and really dial that in before you move on to the rest. So here I have the Tesla on the ATR model. And what I like to do is when I get a sell signal, I actually follow the sell signal. But instead of selling my equities, because I'm in a taxable account myself, I like to sell covered calls and collect that premium. And I like to redeploy it on the buy signals. So this is Tesla over the past 2 years. We can see the ATR model has done just a great job of getting the tops on some of these tops on Tesla. And when we look at the buy signals, we can also see that it's grabbed the bottoms really well. And believe it or not, all I do is I just wait for a sell signal and I start selling covered calls. And I think people get in trouble selling covered calls when they do it just based off intuition or they're expecting something. But I'm pretty strict at actually following the sell signals and waiting for them to occur before I hedge. I don't want to do things based off emotions or a gut feeling. I really wait for this model to turn because it probably has a better win rate than my own feelings. And some people, I can hear the comments already saying like, hey, we got sell signals in November. It got it wrong because the stock kept going up. And absolutely, but you're just paying attention to the sell signals. We also want to look at the trend, and you can see that the trend is bright blue and very wide. So you want to stay in the trend. You don't want to cut your trade short. You can also see that we also have these levels so that when Tesla falls to this level, you want to be a buyer. And you can also see examples like even here when we got to this level, this tends to be resistant, so you need to be waiting for that sell signal. And a couple mistakes I see people make, and some things that I'm still trying to help people do, and this is just what's worked well for me, is using trend a lot more when it comes to selling covered calls. Just because you got a sell signal doesn't automatically mean it's time to hedge. We have to wait for a trend to turn. So what's worked well for me is sometimes, and I can hear the comments coming, sometimes you get a sell signal here, but the trend doesn't change for a few days. And sometimes you might feel late to your trade. But what I like to do is possibly get the sell signal on a daily, and I go down to the 4 hour, and then I can nail the timing of the trade in the 4 hour. So I might get a sell signal there, and I wait for the trend to turn on the 4 hour. That's my striking point. So it's using different time frames to try to develop that thesis on when you're supposed to hedge. Another question I've been receiving is, how do I know what time frame to use the tools on? Always read the onboarding documents. I like to use the tools for what they're optimized for. So the ATR is optimized for the daily and the 12 hour. So that's what I try to use it on. Where people go wrong selling covered calls is not covering themselves when the trade goes against them. So for example, we got some sell signals in here, and it's totally okay sometimes to follow them, and most of the time it's going to work, 86% of the time. But there's going to be instances where the trade goes against you, and I know many people have faced that. So you have to recognize when the trade is going against you quickly to cover that call that you sold. People would ask me, Josh, how do I do that? Well, I always pay attention on the smaller time frame if we are getting a buy signal. So if I got a sell signal here on November 12th, what I do is if I get, and remember, these are all automated notifications, so I don't have to worry about it. But if I get a buy signal here on November 15th on the 4-hour, I close the trade. Why? Because if the 4-hour, look at how it picks up bottoms. I mean, it's not perfect. It's 81% win rate. But if we get a buy signal down here and I sold the call up here, I'm probably already up 50% on the option I just sold. So it's best just to close the trade and wait for the momentum to go up. Even here, if you sold a covered call and you bought back here, you'd probably honestly just be about break even by closing this covered call. But now you can ride the trade all the way back up. Let me go over quickly MicroStrategy. I know a lot of people trade covered calls on MicroStrategy. My primary indicator is the ARB cloud. I'm not going to sell a covered call on MicroStrategy unless we are above the ARB cloud. Again, I'm doing covered calls to generate cash, not to exit my position. So I don't want to sell a covered call in here personally. I want to wait till we see spikes outside the ARB cloud here, here, and here, and here. And same logic, I wait for us to spike out. So let's use this as an example, November 11th. And then what I'll do is I'll go to the ATR model, and we can see we got the sell signal on November 12th. Looks like we had a big spike and then we brought down. And again, a lot of people got caught out on this trade on MicroStrategy where people might have hedged here. We did come down a little bit, but then, oh my goodness, the stock went parabolic. How do we make sure we don't mess that up when we're selling covered calls? You have to exit your trade on the next buy signal. That has helped me tremendously. So you can sell covered calls even in this range. When you sell here, buy back here, sell here, buy back here. That will, save you a lot of headache, and not have to worry about losing or getting called out of your position. And again, we want to use different time frames to kind of look at the trade. So even now, I saw comments and MicroStrategy were up 13-14%. We're up against level 4. We don't see any sell signals yet. I'm already seeing comments on, is anyone selling covered calls on MicroStrategy here? And for me, I wouldn't. The reason being is, we're not above the cloud. We are, slightly above average, but not above it. And then ATR has not signaled a sell signal. Until we see a sell signal and trend starts to change, that's when you hedge. So it's possible we wait till level 5, we get a sell signal, maybe we buy back at level 4. But there's definitely a possibility we go all the way back up to level 6, and you don't want to be hedged in that scenario. So that's just a brief overview on how I use the ATR model to sell covered calls. My biggest tips would be make sure you sell covered calls on sell signals. Don't do it just because you feel like it or you're wanting to generate cash. Do it on sell signals, and then also be willing to close the trade if you get a corresponding buy signal. For options, what I like to do is I like to do 30 days out. I like to do 0.3 deltas. I mean, there's about a 70% chance that the option's going to expire worthless. But we'll go into options and more in-depth selling covered call strategies another day.